Thank you, Tom. I want to pay my respects to the Indigenous owners of the land and their elders past and present. It's Tom and Thursa and Tony and Karen, and to all the workplace leaders here. I've come here via Melbourne from Canberra because I was doing this, trying to stop this bill, and I'm going back here straight after that to try and do the same, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's really part of a bigger story that's going on. But I'm really happy to be here because whenever I talk to public sector workers, I know I'm talking to people who know exactly what we're talking about. We talk about the rules being broken, and we talk about all the lies that have been told to us turning out not to be true, because as public sector workers, they've borne the brunt of 30 years of neoliberalism. So, you know, delegates, we're really at a point where we know that the rules are broken at work for working people. We know that they are. And really, the question is whether we'll be the generation of unionists who'll say we've had enough and we're going to turn it around. And I have to say, wherever I go throughout the country, and no matter who I talk to, the other day I spoke to a young group of hairstylists who were setting up a brand new union for hairstylists, and they were in their early 20s. And 2 days after that, I went and spoke at the CPSU conference, and a whole lot of building workers. So whether you talk to 20-year-old women or the tradies on the building sites, or whether you talk to public sector workers, that what I hear is that everyone's had enough, and everyone knows that we're at a point where we could change things if we all build a big movement to do so. And so the rules are certainly broken at work. They're broken for all the people that suffer just day-to-day wage theft, which happens everywhere. It happens right down the main street here in the small places, but it's not just the small places anymore. It's the celebrity chefs, it's the multinational pizza chains. It's become a business model for so many employers. And why are they just ignoring our minimum wage and the laws that are there? Because those laws aren't strong enough. They know they can get away with it. They know that it's too hard for working people to enforce those rights. That's why we are seeing so much wage theft. And the rules are broken because for all of us that have got enterprise agreements in the federal sector, employers can now go about cancelling those agreements and dropping people back to their award. And this is a terrible thing. It's happened over in Western Australia at Murdoch University in a little mining town called Collie in Western Australia. Now it's threatened with the workers at Streets Ice Cream, a 46% wage cut through their EBA being cancelled. And that's really just outrageous and such a sign about how broken our rules are. And of course, they're broken for the 700,000 workers in the retail and hospitality sector who've had their penalty rates cut. 700,000 workers at a time of record low wage growth have had their wages cut from a commission that's meant to be about protecting working people against the power of employers. And the rules are broken because now we've seen casualisation, insecure work go right throughout our workplaces, right across the country. Did you know that we've got the highest rate of insecure work now in the OECD? Australia does. We used to be the first in the world for all the good things. We're the first in the world to get the living wage, first in the world to win the 8-hour day, and now we're coming first for the most amount of insecure jobs, and that's just a disgrace. And it's happened so quickly in just one generation. We've gone from people being able to get a good steady job or a good chance of it to now it being so hard, if not impossible, for young people. And why does that happen? Again, because the rules aren't strong enough. Employers can just call people casuals when they're not casuals, can tell people to go and get ABNs and to be fake contractors when they're not contractors. You can be on rolling contracts that go on and on and on with no certainty. You can be in the so-called gig economy and then have no rights at all, including not having secure work. So, you know, where we've got a situation where we don't have that base security at work, well, that affects all of our living standards. And of course, rules are broken for all of us because wage growth is at a record low. When I say record low, since they kept records, wage growth hasn't been this low. And it's not because profits are going backwards or profits are even the same rate as our wage increases or CPI. Profits are going up. They're doing really well. What's happened is there's been a split between our wages and profits. And that happened not so long ago, and it's continued and it's continued. So clearly we're in a situation now where our laws aren't doing the job they're meant to, because laws for workplaces were always about one thing: accepting there's a power imbalance between the employer and employee. And what the laws are meant to do is address that imbalance and do what's necessary to do so. And it's really clear that they're not doing their job where we have this situation of insecure work and people not being able to get a pay rise. And it's not just our workplace rights that are broken, it's also our tax laws. The fact that 678 profitable companies in Australia pay no tax is a disgrace. And I know many of you will know, but they do that by moving their profits offshore or doing dodgy agreements around lending money between different parts of their company. So with the growth of companies and with multinationals, there's been more and more ways they've got to basically get around our tax laws. And 48 millionaires in Australia pay no tax, not even the Medicare levy, and they're millionaires. You might think, well, how did they do that? 19 of them spent on average $1 million each on their tax accountant. $1 million to your accountant to look after your tax. Imagine how much money you must really have if you're spending $1 million on your tax agent. And of course that's tax deductible the next year. And at the same time, you know, Turnbull is handing over even more money to them, $65 billion of our money in tax cuts to corporations at the top, just continuing on with the same thing. And of course, that money, what's that for? It's for our services, it's for the work that you do. It's for our hospitals, it's for our schools, it's for making our society fair and our communities livable. And so where some people decide not to contribute to our society, we've got to change the rules to make sure everyone does. Now the question really is how did that break? Like, how did all this happen? Well, we had the global economic crisis, and after that we saw a big concentration of wealth to the top, and that's happened around the world, and it's happened, of course, here in Australia because we're part of a global economy. But it's not just that. It's because we've been on a 30-year experiment of a particular policy idea called neoliberalism. In Australia, we've also called it things like economic rationalism, or, you know, I suppose we can just call it trickle-down economics, because that's what it is at its heart. And as I said in the beginning, of course, it's our public sector that's really felt the brunt of that, because it's all been about small governments. So, and the lie that if we privatise everything, the private sector will do things better, prices will be cheaper, there'll be more choice, and there'll be better service. But of course, what we've seen is prices go up, services go down, and jobs, you know, going down, as well as our conditions. So there's that. But of course, it's also about making sure that that tax cuts happen, so those with already money have even more. And so, you know, what's been the result of that? You know, we've been waiting for the trickle down to start. It sort of hasn't started, has it? I mean, where are the good jobs, where jobs have been casualised? Where are our good services where they've actually got worse because the private sector has been driven by the profit motive, of course? You know, where are our pay rises at a time of record low wage growth? And so we've seen that experiment happen. And at the end of that experiment, 30 years, and 30 years of those promises, inequality is at a 70-year high. That's the result. That's the result of following those policies. And when I think about it, like, what is it about that particular idea that's so flawed? There's a few things, but I think there's one really important one. At the heart of it, it's this idea that at some point, those that already have a lot of money will say, we'll put limits on our greed, and that we've got enough, and we're going to stop there, and now we're going to share with everyone else. So they would like self-regulate and say, okay, you know, we've got enough, and, you know, here's the limit, you know, no more for us. But they really haven't done that, have they? They've not even thought about doing that. In fact, people like Gina Reinhardt and a whole lot of others, they think they deserve it. They think they are where they are because of some inherent specialness about them, and they haven't gone about putting limits on their greed. So who's going to do that? We'll have to do that. That's what we've always had to do. People have had to do that. We have had to say, well, we want a society that's fair for everyone. If you're not going to share, well, we just have to make sure we've got strong enough rules to make sure there is sharing and that everyone has a good life, not just some people. So, You know, so that's the situation we're in after 30 years. You think, well, why aren't our governments doing something about it? Because, you know, inequality is a terrible thing, of course, for individuals, but it's a terrible thing for the economy as well. And even for those people who don't care about people, they usually care about the economy. And you've got economists all around the world, the IMF, the OECD, all saying that inequality is such a threat to the economy and to society. But yet our Treasurer, Scott Morrison, is living in another world, because he says, oh, actually we don't have a problem with inequality in Australia, it's not getting worse. In the face of all the evidence, all the science, all the economists, even like the conservative or the right-wing economists, he says, oh no, it's not true, it's not true. It's a bit like climate denial, isn't it? It's the same sort of thinking. Because if you accepted that there was a problem, you'd have to say, okay, what's causing it? And it might just be the policies that he continues to implement. So you'd have to undo a whole way of thinking to address it. So, and another example of just how much he doesn't get it is last week he was saying that, pointing out again what was obvious, I think he might have been asked by a journalist, that profits are going up. But wages aren't, what's wrong? And he says, well, you know, I'm calling on the employers of Australia now that profits are going so well, please give your workers pay rises. So I don't know, has the state government said, here's your pay rises? Scott Morrison's told us? No. I don't think there's probably any employers out there that have done that because the Treasurer said so. That's not how it works, is it? And so we need to, in this case, replace neoliberalism with something better. And when we talk about something better, there's two things that governments can do in order to combat inequality. The first is make sure everyone pays their fair share of tax. The second is make sure working people and their unions have strong enough rights and protections at work. Those are the two things not just recommended by us, but recommended by those same quite conservative economists around the world. Because we're like the checks, we're the check and balance in the system. Without strong unions, without workers being able to organise, you're going to have this situation, aren't you? And in the end, this whole idea of neoliberalism and getting unions out of the way, because we're actually an impediment to the free market, has led to this problem. So we need a whole change of mindset if we want to have fairness back. And that's what we want to go about the campaign to fight for, to change the rules. But of course those who benefit from the current system aren't going to want to change it, are they? Like, of course they're not. They're not going to. And already we've got Michaelia Cash, as you've seen, out there fighting us. And why have they stepped up this fight? They have, because we've been out there calling out the problem, pointing out that they're making it worse, and saying, well, we want to change the rules and we want to bring back fairness. Of course they don't like that, and big business doesn't like that either. So as you've seen, those laws they've introduced would allow the government of the day, so her, the minister, an employer, a business lobbyist, to act to sack union leaders, to shut down unions and stop them merging. Can you believe that? That's the only type of thing would happen in a totalitarian regime, not here. But that's what they're proposing. And why are they doing that? Because actually they want us distracted, they want us focused internally, spending all of our resources internally and not talking about the things that I've been talking about. But we're going to defeat those laws, and we've been having actually some good conversations I can't really reveal, but it's going in the right direction, put it that way, with the crossbench senators. And the thing that's resonating with them is this, is that we can't accept in our country, well, do they accept that there should be one law for the Commonwealth Bank and another law for workers and for our organisations? Is that fair that there's one set of law for us and another set of law for people who have much more power? And that's quite a powerful argument, because it's actually the truth and it's actually fair. And a lot of those crossbenchers are with us on that. So hopefully if we keep pushing the right way, it'll be good. You've done an excellent job here with Jackie Lambie, who's been doing the right thing. But what are we going to do? How do we build this campaign? Well, everyone in this room's been part of campaigns before. And you know the key to any campaign is being able to deepen and spread the message and get as many people as possible on side. It's actually, in a way, simple. What you've got to do is just how we go about it. And you know, that is just going back and taking this out to your workplaces, talking to your friends and family, and talking about the same story I just told about why is it that we can't get secure jobs anymore, and why is it that our wages are so low? Well, because some people have too much power, and we need to change the rules to keep up with that. And that's the campaign. And that's a really big thing. It's not about one enterprise agreement. It's not about a pay rise and a bargaining round. This is a fundamental shift we want to make to our rights and allow us to have the power we need to bring fairness back. So that's a big fight, and every single union member around the country I've been talking to, and many other people I've been talking to, have said that they're in it for the fight, and they're prepared to do that, because we know that our parents and our grandparents have been in other situations where they've had it just as tough, sometimes much tougher, where all jobs were insecure, where there was no universal superannuation, where women had to leave the workforce, you know, when they got married. They never accepted that. They never accepted that that's inevitable, and that's the way things are. They went about campaigns to change the rules. So we've got to get the public on side, because it's by moving public opinion that we'll move the politicians. Because we won't just get Labor to agree to what we want. We won't. We'll only do that by moving public opinion. And even if we get them to agree, it's almost impossible for Labor and Greens to win control of the Senate in the next federal election. It's probably most likely to be that the Xenophon team will have control. So we've got to keep our eyes on the fact that we've got to win public opinion, because that's the only way that we'll win them as well. But at the moment, I feel really optimistic. I feel like that there's a tide all around the world of people sort of seeing, as Tom said, the emperor's got no clothes, and that, well, actually, things aren't working out for the majority, and that we want to be part of a movement that's going to change it. And what's happening in Australia, it's always been us. It's always been the trade union movement that's picked up the ball and been the ones to go and fight for equality. And so I just want to ask everyone in this room, are you with me in this fight?
Yeah.
Awesome. I have plenty of time for questions, so please don't be shy.
Yes, Sally, I've got one. So you mentioned the all around the world there seems to be a bit of a tide of... I've never needed a microphone. All around the world there's this sort of sense that the emperor's got new clothes. In some parts of the world that's resulted in a swing to what most people would see as the right. I'm not sure that the people who vote for those people think that it's necessarily a swing to the right. Is there an opportunity for the union movement to fill that space?
Look, I'm really glad you asked that question. We know what's happening here in Australia with One Nation voters or others that if Pauline Hanson didn't exist and there was another type of Pauline Hanson, would vote for her or vote for a Trump-like person in Australia. We know that those people had expectations about what life would be like, and it's based on an idea of what it was like, because mainly they're not first-generation Australians, based on what it was like for their parents. And so they had a certain expectation that they'd be able to have a good steady job, that they'd be able to support their family, that their living standards would be at a certain point. That was their expectations. When actually what's happened is this, it's turned out like this. So they can't get secure jobs, their kids can't get secure jobs, and they can't see any hope for the future. If you look at the areas where there's really high votes like this, it's North Tasmania and also central Queensland, and we know what's happened with jobs in those areas. We know the effect of that on communities. And so there's this expectation gap, if I can call it that. And what's happening is Pauline Hanson's filling it. She's coming along and saying, you know, see that gap between what you thought Australia was like and what it actually is? People who blame for that are refugees and Muslims. That's what she's saying. That's her explanation. So what have we got to do? Well, we've got to just go and tell people the truth. That's what we've got to do. We've got to go and tell them the truth. The reason why this has happened is because we've been following this idea of neoliberalism that's led to services leaving communities, have led to the destruction of secure jobs. That's the reason why things aren't what we expect it to be, because we've taken away all of those protections and those rights that we had. That's the reason. And the people to blame aren't below you, they're above you. And so if we provide people with that framework of thinking, which is a different explanation and the truthful explanation, well then they've got a different way of interpreting the world and understanding what's going on. Because if we don't do that, I mean, of course, Trump's got such a vested interest in, you know, blaming Mexicans and blaming everyone else, because he's doing quite well, isn't he? And so the more he can distract people off from what the real issues are. So our job as trade unionists is to tell the truth and bring clarity to the situation, but also to provide a strategy for how we're going to change things. Because we can't just talk about problems. We've never done that. We've never been about that. We've also got to talk about the solutions and what we're going to do about it.
How do we get over the other problem that jobs are going to other countries, that if people don't reduce their wages here, all the jobs will go overseas?
Yeah, this is a much harder question and one not simply answered. So first of all, we shouldn't be signing free trade agreements to trade away our jobs, first of all. So that's got to be a key demand that we've got going into the next election as a key part of secure jobs. So, you know, even if you have a full-time job, it's not the whole thing, it's not secure, is it, if it could just be traded off for beef production. So that's got to be a key thing. And as many of you will know, at the moment, those trade negotiations happen in private, but there's people that are well involved in it. It's all the business lobbyists. They're the ones who are writing up these agreements. And of course, it's not free trade at all. It's the most regulated agreements you can possibly imagine. Like all of these rules, it's basically the rules that have been written to suit business, and we don't even have a voice in there, and they don't care about our jobs because they believe in the free market, and as we have free market of capital, well, who cares about the jobs will sort itself out. Alongside that, there is a movement in Southeast Asia, and mainly Southeast Asia, around a living wage. So it's the same concept that we've had here, that we won 100 years ago this year actually, the living wage, first place in the world. And once the principle was decided, which was no one should work full time and not earn enough to live on, like no one should live in poverty, well then how do you work that out? And it's this idea of a basket of goods. So what do you need in that basket of goods? You know, you've got to pay your rent, you've got to, you know, pay all these other things. So that same movement is starting up with our neighbours, with some of our trading neighbours. That's not going to happen quickly either, but that's got to be part of what we've got to talk about, because in the end, capital is global, isn't it? And so unless we start also supporting trade union movements elsewhere and saying globally that we need strong trade union movements around the world to counter the power of those global multinationals, that in the end it has to be the solution, but it's the one. Yeah.
As a woman, I'm pretty annoyed about having to work Fridays for free. And I was just wondering if you can see a time when there will be pay parity for men and women.
So in the federal laws, so I know that most of you here are under the state laws, but they always in the end impact on each other. We had the equal pay for equal work, and we won that, and around 1975 we had the pay gap come right back down to 86%, and pretty much has not moved whatsoever since then. So a whole generation, it's stayed the same, and there's been a whole lot of research into why that might be the case. One of the reasons why we haven't been able to win equal pay cases after that is because also about how our laws work. There was one successful equal pay case under this current Act, and that was one that I was part of at the ASU for community workers. And the court decided that, because these are care workers in the community sector, non-government community sector and disability sector, that first of all, we accept that the work has been devalued because it's caring work. We accept because society has put lesser value on caring because it's always been women that have done it, that work's been undervalued and not paid properly. Then they went on to work out, you know, what the pay rate should be. We argued it should be parity with the public sector, which they accepted. What happened since then is that that Fair Work Commission's been stacked with a whole lot of not just, you know, bosses, but way out there ones. And now they've overturned that principle, and now they've gone back to what it was, just after we won that. So I wouldn't say this to United Voice delegates, but that campaign they've got for childcare workers, very hard to win that legally now. That's why we've got to change the rules, to win that, because if we can bring up the pay rates for feminised industries, and Australia's got one of the most gender segregated workforces in the world, that will make a big difference for equal pay. But it's much more than that, as you know. There's the fact that we don't have affordable or free childcare. We don't have those things, and of course, the patriarchy still exists.
I'll also remind you that when she said, "Are you with me?" you all said yes.